Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October from the Kislak Stacks. For those of you new to the series, I'm Lynn Farrington, Director of Programs and Senior Curator here in the Kislak Center at the Penn Libraries. Before I introduce today's speaker, I would like to remind you of the remaining presentations during this fall semester. On Friday, November 15th, Jessica Martucci, curator for the Barbara Bates Center for the Study of Nursing, will explore the World War II photography of nurse Mary C. Brennan in a talk she has titled Through Nursing's Lenses. Then on Friday, December 6th, for our last talk of the semester, Samantha Hall, Kislak's civic engagement curator, and her community projects assistant, undergraduate Jessie Jha, will discuss a late 1990s Japanese fashion magazine that inspired generations of fashionistas in a conversation they have titled Fruits Magazine, Japanese Pioneers of Transcendent Street Fashion, Youth Subculture. Now on to today's presentation. As I was saying, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Holly Mengel, Head of Archives and Manuscript Processing in the Kislak Center. Holly has worked at Kislak since 2013, although she's been processing collections for over 20 years in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Princeton, and Philadelphia. I first met Holly in 2009 when she was project manager of Phase 1 of the Pack School Hidden Collections Initiative, a role that revealed to us at Penn what an amazing archivist she was. We were sad then when she went off to work at Princeton in 2011, but thrilled to welcome her back in 2013 to take on the oversight and direction of archival and manuscript processing here at Penn Libraries. She's a brilliant teacher of archives and their processing, having presented to many groups over the years. In addition, she is currently teaching with Professor Zita Nunez, an English department course on professional archiving and curating for academic settings, introducing graduate students to the world of archives through theory and practice. Today, Holly will speak about a collection that has been a favorite of hers since the original cache of materials came to Penn in 2019. Of course, that wasn't the first time that Ursula Sternberg's work was at Penn, for in the fall of 1995, there was an exhibition highlighting her visual diaries in the old Rosenwald Gallery up here on the 6th floor of Van Pelt Library. Holly will be sharing some of those visual diaries with us today in a talk titled With Brush in Hand, How Ursula Sternberg Viewed the World. We will follow the talk with a Q&A, so feel free to put any questions you have in the chat during the presentation, or you can raise your hands following it. Now over to you, Holly.
Thanks, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. All right, and I am going to get rid of my face. And thank you all so much for coming here. I am really delighted to be here today to talk about the extremely talented artist Ursula Sternberg-Hertz. As Lynn said, I worked on this collection in 2021, and it remains one of my favorite collections that I've ever worked with. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the work of a processing archivist, so before I get started talking about Ursula Sternberg-Hertz, I'm going to talk for just 1 minute about what we do. After a collection is acquired by a repository like Penn, a processor looks at that collection, determines how, or sometimes if, the creator of the collection organized it and used it. We then further arrange the collection so that it will make sense to researchers of all sorts, rehouse it in acid-free boxes and folders, and describe it in a finding aid, which is nothing more than a guide to the collection. Our only job is to make the material safe, usable, and accessible. But along the way, processors are almost always a little bit changed by the collections with which they work, because it is truly an intimate process. We read mail and diaries. We always learn about finances. Sometimes we learn about loves and losses, and we discover fears and worries. And usually we really get to know the person who created the collection, sometimes spending months or even years with them. So being an archivist is a privilege, and I know of very few other professions that allow a person to walk around, however briefly, in someone's world and relive their history. Therefore, moving forward, you will notice that I will refer to Ursula Sternberg-Hertz as Ursula, because I feel that I know her and she is my friend. Usually, when archivists work with a person's papers, they are very monotone. a creamy tan with black accents. An occasional splash of color usually brings the camera out, and we often delight with our colleagues over these wonders. When I opened the first box of Ursula's papers, I thought it was possible that my brain would explode because there was simply so much color. And this is when I realized that I was not going to read my way into Ursula's world. I was going to see the world very much through her eyes and her amazing artistic talent. So, before exploring Ursula's world, here's a very brief biographical sketch of her. To learn more about Ursula's life, I would recommend Monique Seiler's biography, Between Two Worlds: The Life and Art of Ursula Sternberg. Ursula was born in 1925 in Germany to Walter and Dorothea Hertz. By the time she was 11, the family had fled Nazi Germany to live in the Netherlands, fleeing again into Belgium after the Nazis occupied the Netherlands in 1940. The family lived in partial hiding, but eventual fear for Ursula's safety resulted in her going into complete hiding in an acquaintance's attic. It seems to me that the separation from her family and her isolation impacted her for the rest of her life. Following the war, Ursula moved to London, using her artistic skills in fabric and fashion design and advertising. In 1957, she married Jonathan Sternberg, an American music conductor and professor. The two traveled and lived in Nova Scotia and Brussels before moving to New York in 1966. By this time, Ursula and Jonathan were the parents of Peter and Tanya. The family eventually moved to Philadelphia, living first in Elkins Park and then in Chestnut Hill, where they lived until her death in 2000. As I worked through the collection, I learned that Ursula was a survivor, a creative force, and a dynamic personality. But I also got the distinct sense that she was not always happy. I think that Monique Seiler said it best when she indicated that Ursula did not always seem to feel at home anywhere in the world. Despite that, Ursula's world is very vivid, and in the remaining time, I would like to walk through her world with you. But please keep in mind that this walk is very much influenced by who I am and the artwork that appealed to me. Any of your walks would be very different. Ursula left thousands and thousands of pieces of artwork that could be interpreted in completely different ways, which is, of course, the beauty of art, and, if I dare say, the beauty of archival collections. I am not an art historian, and my love of this collection has as much to do with loving Ursula as it does with the technical appreciation of her artistic abilities. I like to think that my having walked in Ursula's world has made me an appreciator of her art and someone who views her with compassion, empathy, and admiration. All right, so on to Ursula's world. Some of the earliest material in the collection shows Ursula's love of color. I particularly love the rainbow effect that she has mastered in 1934 when she would have been 9. These other two letters were written when she was 10. She clearly had a desire to make a letter more than a simple transmission of information. Since working with the artist collections here at Kislak, I have been trying to teach myself to paint, and that is primarily because I have loved the idea of first sending actual mail, and second, making that mail fun. My niece and nephew have been recipients of many hand-drawn postcards since about 2021, thanks to Ursula and a few other artists whose papers are here. We don't have much material from her time during the war or her time in hiding, but I can only hope that she was actually given lots of art supplies and that I simply have not been able to identify paintings from that time frame. It seems that life was not truly life for Ursula without art. What we do have is a photocopy of a book that she created in 1989 that she titled Growing Up in Occupied Holland and Belgium, 1940 to 44. This volume describes her experiences, and because I'm happy with the happy over the sad, I'm going to focus on the page describing the liberation, in which she writes, "The madness of it. Those who were there will never forget it. The city went crazy with joy." However, farther along in this volume, it hints at what life was like even as she celebrates a new chapter. She writes here, "My very first outing, first walk alone as a free girl, was, and still is, the best walk I have ever taken. For I still sense the intoxication, the all-invasive sensation of safety, the joy of living, of having hope and a future, of not having to look over my shoulder, of being able to breathe, of just being, of being free and free of fear, of being alive, of being young." And while it's really horrible to think that she was deprived of these totally basic human rights, she did say later in the volume that life did return to normal, and that meant a job and a career. So, as I was working through the collection, I was utterly delighted by the sketches of fashion as well as the ads she created for her father's business Forma, which sold lingerie. Her fashion sketches can be found all over the place, tucked into diaries, on board, on fabric. Many of them are incredibly informal, like these on the left, but some appear to have been made for presentation, like this wonderful pink confection on the right. Most of what I will be showing to you today are themes that can be found across the collection, but this costume series that depicts ladies' fashions from Eve to 1990 is something that is unique in the collection, and therefore I've added it in its entirety. I am not sure how or even if it was used, but it clearly took a lot of research as well as a fair amount of imagination. So as you'll see, we start with Eve, who isn't dressed in much, and move on through history. Um, each one of the plates is numbered in the bottom left-hand corner, and you can see that some of the prints or the drawings are circled and others are not. We move through time. They were clearly all designed to work together, but only a few of them would have been drawn from Ursula's lifetime or memory. And the focus on on the teenager makes me really wonder about her as a teenager herself. I'm fairly certain that this series was created in the late 1950s. 1958 is the last date that shows up here, which means that her concept of fashion and what it would look like in 1980 and 1990 are purely imaginary and wonderfully wacky. While the purpose of her costume series is unknown, the purpose of her advertisements for Forma are very much known. Not only are they a job for her, but they were also an effort to help her family's business, one that suffered badly from the war and their escape from Nazi occupied lands. Um, I'm not going to lie, I love these. I find them to be utterly charming, filled with whimsy, and the undies incorporated into every scene make me look at least twice just to catch all the fun details. And the carriage in the bottom right that has bras in the window are utterly delightful. Before getting into some of the more general themes, Ursula used her talents for her family, creating cards, announcements, and celebrating the milestones of loved ones. One of my particular favorites is this New Year's card depicting the households of her family members, her sister and brother-in-law on the left, her parents in the middle, and herself and Jonathan on the right. I am sure that the metaphorical proximity of their households and the family's abilities to do the things that they love, as shown here in their windows, is a direct result of the family's experiences during the Second World War. Her children's births were announced in style, Peter to the left and Tanya in the middle top. And in the same style, 30 odd years later, Ursula announced the arrival of Luca Gabriel and Lara Sophia, Tanya's children and Ursula's grandchildren. In addition, the collection contains absolutely stunning portraits of her family. I've selected this sketch of her beautiful granddaughter, Lara, because it's one of my absolute favorites, and for some reason I particularly enjoy her little nose. She did not always just document the happy events. Her father's death was recorded in a brief sentence, as can be seen in the image to the left. To the right are two images from her husband's hospital stay. Presumably while visiting Jonathan, Ursula spent her time sketching. And you can see Jonathan in the center, but what I really particularly love is that she took the time to sketch one of his caregivers, and I suspect that his face is someone who's usually a blur during scary times. The bulk of Ursula's drawings were created as she went about her daily life. Her visual diaries, diaries in which she sketched and painted as well as described her life, are a treasure trove beyond description. Here are just a few examples of what these look like, but there are over 100. There are also thousands of loose drawings and hundreds of sketchbooks. The images I will show here are a tiny percentage of the paintings, sketches, and objects that are contained within this collection. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of visual works. So, Ursula was an experimenter. Some of my absolute favorite drawings are ones where she documents a new method, a new drawing, a new pen, or a new paper. On the left, she talks about paper, that it drinks a lot of ink. Um, the second two images were had a treatment of a coffee and sugar on top of charcoal and pencil, and then a wash because it was too sticky and would not dry. The third image, she writes that she has just discovered most exciting pens, silver and gold. She writes, new, totally gorgeous invention, made for me, for me. Wonder if it's permanent and forever. I love it. Hard to see in the silver, but it's there. And finally, on the fourth image, she mentions seeing an exhibit and then says, I must try gold leaf and also wood. Although Ursula often drew spectacular moments and things that were unusual and amazing, I love that she also took the time to draw things that were simply commonplace and unremarkable. Through her eyes, we can see a fraction of a second in a park, a man fishing in a park, a man using a phone booth at an airport in Philadelphia, which today might actually go down as unusual and amazing, students on Temple's campus, and two people sitting in a park with their dog. We also see a woman on her balcony in Paris, a man getting his hair cut, people waiting in line, and people simply sitting and being. Sometimes in archives, only the extraordinary gets preserved, which is obviously important, but so are the unremarkable moments that make up the bulk of our lives. You can travel with Ursula if you look through her drawings. The beauty of her paintings and the colors she used transport you all across Europe, through the countryside. Very few of them actually have locations, but these landscapes scream France and Italy to me. So, for those of you who can afford a vacation to the sun drenched lands of the Mediterranean, feel free to book an afternoon in the reading room rather than a plane ticket and explore the wonders of that part of the world. Ursula did not just paint bucolic landscapes, but the images of her cities and towns have a dramatically different style, much more black and white, even with the splashes of color. I'm guessing an art historian or maybe even a psychologist might have an interesting interpretation of that. But regardless, an ambience and energy can be felt in these images that are not felt in the peaceful landscapes shown before. You can also go to China with Ursula. She traveled there with her husband Jonathan and see yet another style that is both unique and atmospheric. In the middle, these splashes of color on mostly black and white give a feeling that's quite different from a similar image on the left that is simply black on white. So, Ursula seemed to struggle with finding a home in the United States. Her visual diaries contain text that is frequently critical of the country and its citizens. But she lived for many years in the Philadelphia area and apparently felt most at home in Chestnut Hill, a neighborhood that probably felt a bit more like neighborhoods in Europe. Here you will see the Delaware River in Philadelphia on the left, a country road in the middle, and one of many drawings of Central Park in New York that can be found in the collection. As always, I am astounded by how choice of color and brushstrokes can give a sense of a feeling. Here, each of these images, despite of the setting, gives a feeling of chilly rain, a crisp autumn day, the baking sun, and the refreshing breeze of the tropics. Most of Ursula's paintings and drawings play on my senses, but few do so as much as these that show weather and seasons. The next few slides will tell you as much about me as they will about Ursula. Growing up, if I was sitting still, I was reading, even in the car. So much so that when it came to learning how to drive, I did not know how to go anywhere, including places like my high school or the grocery store, both of which were only about 10 minutes away and I had gone to thousands of times. Books consumed me and transported me through history and time. And so I absolutely love all of Ursula's drawings of readers. I can connect instantaneously to those utterly absorbed in their books. Ursula also painted animals, lots of them. Many of these quick and happy sketches and paintings are found within her visual diaries. And as I was working through the diaries, I found that I could not wait to turn each page. The anticipation of discovering what would be on the next page was intoxicating. Each time I came across an animal, I snapped a picture. These are literally the tip of the iceberg. And those of you who know me know that I'm a cat person, and one of the things I love most about these drawings is how Ursula has captured the utter cattiness of the cats. So frequently, they have their backs turned or completely ignoring Ursula. Either that or they're being so cute that they were probably preventing her from doing her work. Regardless, I felt that Ursula knew cats, respected them, and documented them in all of their feline superiority. It is possible that I took pictures of all of her cat paintings. I had to work very hard to select only a few, and I picked ones that showed not just the furry felines, but also how she worked, with some very rough sketches as well as more polished drawings. As I would work through the collection, I found myself snickering over Ursula's text. I get the sense that she had a wicked and possibly brutal sense of humor, and it shows up in her diaries and some of her drawings. Here are two of my favorites. The sleepy gent on the left was captioned listening to a bad reading of James Joyce, and the item on the right is from Ursula's book Growing Up in Occupied Holland and Belgium, 1940 to 44. While describing the wonders of the liberating forces in her town, she states the Americans were particularly attractive with their round, tight little bottoms and nicely cut pants. While this is funny in of itself, I love that she chose to illustrate the page with four Americans bent over displaying their best assets. Ursula painted motion. There are sketchbooks after sketchbooks full of dancers, but you also get a sense of motion from these streetscapes and rowers. As I mentioned before, I'm in awe of her ability to change from peaceful stillness to grace and energy simply by changing her style. Perhaps because of my utter lack of musical talent, I am particularly drawn to Ursula's paintings of music. Perhaps I might more accurately state that she painted musicians, but honestly, some of these images make me feel the music. It seems that Ursula had lots of opportunities to meet musicians and see practices and performances because of her husband's profession as a conductor. And again, there are thousands of paintings of musicians in the collection. And as always, these are just a few of my favorites. But in a very rare moment of decisiveness, I will say that the drawing on the left is probably my favorite drawing within the entire collection. Even when Ursula's drawings were abstract, they were almost always grounded in reality. But some of my favorites are the ones that simply cannot exist in the real world, but I wish very much did. To the left, we have a man made of grapes in her advertisement for her uncle's wine business. On the right, we have a tiny man sitting atop what I think is a music stand. And in the middle is possibly my second favorite image in the collection. I wish these guys were frolicking about everywhere because I can't actually imagine anyone being grumpy in their company. Lastly, Ursula painted people, portraits, life drawings, and casual scenes. Some of the models were used over and over again, particularly one called Suzanne, but I get the impression that people were sketched quickly whenever she saw someone who appealed to her, and then more detailed work was done later. There are again thousands of portraits of paintings of people in the collection. The amount is simply staggering. Also staggering is the number of nudes that Ursula drew, and I think that has something to do with the art sessions that Ursula held at her home, inviting fellow artists to join her in drawing and painting. She usually had a model who the group would sketch. Monique Seiler wrote, I cherish the trips to her house to attend the sessions in her bohemian living room, where I would work in awe of the talented artists collected there. What a rare chance that was. The winter flew by, marked by paper mountain of visual riffs, the drawing of a half dozen artists collecting like snowflakes, each one its own unique take. Out of the thousands of nudes, I selected this one because in the top right-hand corner, there's a person's name, address, and phone number, and he is identified as a handyman. I like to think that this woman was being sketched while a group of outrageously talented people discussed the challenges of finding a handyman. Maybe the model was the one who provided the name. I saved this drawing to speak about until the end because one of the things I love most about archives is that while a collection is, on the surface, a paper remains of a single person, an archival collection is really the papery remains of a person, their relationships, and their impact on the world and others. Ursula did not live in a void. Somewhere out there, there are collections of other artists who attended her art sessions and drew the same woman. Maybe other artists also jotted down this handyman's number. Because Ursula's family generously gifted her collection to the Penn Libraries, we have had the opportunity to preserve this collection and provide access to it to any researcher who is interested for as long as the university lets. As a result, Ursula will live long after all the rest of us are gone. But I absolutely love to think of all the other people who she drew and talked about in her visual diaries who will also live on. Even though some of her subjects were nameless and they were occasionally faceless, they all embody a spirit that keeps them alive and relevant in our worlds. Thank you so much for joining me today, for taking the time to meet and get to know Ursula for the first time or remembering her if you knew her in real life. It was a real privilege for me to work with this collection, and I thank you. I'm also very sorry about all the technical problems.
Thank you so much, Holly. That was amazing.
Very sorry about the technical things.
I know you cannot control those things,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but I was really, really happy to hear all of this. This is wonderful. I remember when the collection came in bit by bit. I remember the earlier volumes that Jonathan had given us. That was our first taste of actually having part of Ursula's opus in our collection. And so it's been absolutely wonderful to hear more about it and all the things that you've discovered as you've worked with that collection. I think we could take questions now. I'm just going to mention one thing. Jeffrey, do you want to talk about that? I mean, this was really lovely what you wrote in the chat.
I was just actually looking in emails to see about sending my scans to you or to someone so that they could go into the collection since I have the program book. It was really fabulous for my friends that are still around to receive those portraits because she captured them as both people and as violinists remarkably well. I mean, those that I know they're playing, I can recognize their playing posture. So that it's another tribute to her abilities to imprison a moment of time on paper.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We would love to have those scans. That would be wonderful to add to the collection. I know. And I know we have some more things thanks to Peter, who's with us today. So hello, Peter. So I think, you know, there'll be a little bit more material that will become part of that collection very soon.
Just to follow up on Jeffrey's point, if people are interested in the musician drawings, there's also a collection of those drawings at the National Arts Club in New York. So if anybody should happen to visit there, they can see some quite nice drawings that are there.
Oh, that's wonderful to know, Peter. I think Holly would love to put that information into the record so that she could direct people to that collection. And if you know of any other places that hold some of her material, we always like to point people to other parts of the collection that might be somewhere else. So any information like that's enormously useful.
Sure. The Victoria and Albert Museum is probably the most prestigious of all the homes of her early works. Some of the fashion designs that were shown at the early part of this presentation are in that collection. They have about a dozen or so works, which was from the period where my mother was working as a fashion designer, and principally for, at the time, a very well-known designer called Zika Asher, who was part of the movement known as the Horoxes.
Okay. Oh, well, that's wonderful to know. I know Holly would love to put that information into the record so that people coming to us to look for stuff know to also look at the V&A for more information about those early years. Do we have any questions from the floor?
I'd like to share a story if I could.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Yeah. My name's Elliot Schwartz. Let me try to get you here. On my claim to fame, I was Ursula's favorite art dealer. And we had this very special relationship. And our gallery was 1 block away from Ursula's house. And she would come and spend hours and hours, and she would constantly sketch, constantly. And there was no end. If you saw some of the books, when we had an exhibition at the end, we had so many different books and different things she did. I own so many of her pieces that we loved. I have a lot of personal things she did for me and for my wife, for my daughters, that whenever there was a birthday or a celebration or something, she always did a personal sketch or a painting that was fabulous. When we first moved into our house, we had a big house in Mount Airy. We first moved, we needed a piece of art for a wall, and she wouldn't sell us this piece. And we loved it, and everyone that came to the party wanted to buy it. She ended up making us a copy. She made us an original. She put our house in the painting, and it appears in the book. Peter put it on page 214 in the book. It's a huge piece that now hangs over my fireplace. So I feel very honored. We had a very special relationship, and I love the family. And Jonathan and Peter and Tanya had a very special relationship.
Thank you, Elliot.
Yep. Yeah, Roxanne was just showing an image of that work because Monique had included the original painting, which is the fold out in the book Between Two Worlds, and this one that Roxanne is showing was the one that was done for Elliot.
Yeah, it was, and the one with the umbrellas, Peter, everyone loved where the umbrellas are going to a train station. They meet at a train station in Paris, and they fall in love, and there's a big rose, or a rose meets a rose. I don't have it all in front of me. I'm actually in Madrid right now, but we have so many of her pieces that we loved.
Any other comments, questions, or anything that people would like to say? Well, Holly, do you want to get back on the screen for a second so we can see you? Oh, John has a question for you.
Oops, did we lose Holly there?
She's back.
There she is. Hi, Holly. Thank you. That was so wonderful. And nice to have such a wonderful audience of people who were connected with Ursula. I was one of the people here for that show that Lynn alluded to back in the 1990s, long ago, but it's a nice sort of homecoming. As people make these comments, Holly, and you describe and show us all the sort of treasures you found, I wonder if you could talk for a second as a cataloger whose job is to describe things. Somehow I feel that this collection bursts the boundaries of our categories, and we struggle to put it into our standard subject headings and descriptions and inventories. And I wondered if you would reflect on that for a couple of minutes. I've read your finding aid, and it's very thorough, and yet it somehow, your presentation today captures something that a textual description doesn't do very well. And I wonder if you have some thoughts. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I would say first and foremost that finding aids are by design supposed to be impartial. And so I think that one of the things that I love about a presentation like this, or in fact, a blog post, which I did write also, is that that's where I feel like I'm allowed to talk about the things that I absolutely love. But I absolutely also recognize that, like, I don't know that someone gets the true flavor of this collection, which is sort of, I've only ever worked with one or two collections that sort of was as overwhelming to the senses as this collection was. And I'm not 100% sure how you do represent that in a catalog record or a finding aid. This is one where you really have to see the colors and the emotions and of Ursula in order to, I think, get a sense of the collection. So I don't know exactly how to do that. If anyone has suggestions, I would take them, because I would love for Ursula's life to be a little bit more vivid in catalog records, which are designed very, very much to be objective and impartial, which is, I hope that I did a good job, because I feel strongly that I probably wanted to talk about how much I loved her in every sentence in the finding aid, and probably had to curb myself. So but yes, I think there's room for other avenues for this collection to be brought out of the boxes and into the colorful world that she created. I don't know if that helps, John.
No, thank you. That's exactly what I'm thinking about as you talk,
Yeah.
discussions of World War II, of course, but also the history of music and the representation of musicians. Obviously, many other themes you touched on. I do think it sort of presents some challenges for those of us who steward collections like this to find ways to put them in front of people who will be as overjoyed as you are, but might not necessarily know Ursula Sternberg's name off the top of their heads. Thank you.
There's actually an interesting question here. Roxanne asks, any way to present Ursula in conjunction with live music performance? That's actually really interesting. And we do have a Music in the Pavilion series at the Kislak Center. And now that you've asked that question, it gets me thinking that maybe we could actually do we could do some kind of performance. And when we do these from music performances, we usually show materials in an adjacent room. So one could actually do the two pieces of it. Maybe it's worth talking about, Peter. I mean, as a musician, maybe you could help us think about that, and we could do something, because what we do when we do these Music in the Pavilion is that it's usually a small group or, an individual performance, but we will have a talk beforehand, and we like to connect the music to something in our collection. And maybe this would be a really nice idea for something to do. So I think that's an absolutely great idea, and we will pursue it. We will think about how we might do something like that, and the kind of music that she was interested in, maybe some of the sketches of people at particular concerts or things of that nature where we know what the music was, and we can pull out some of that music, especially if it's, chamber music or smaller group or something like that. So I love that idea. Holly, what do you think?
When
Sounds
Jonathan
absolutely
was still alive,
fabulous.
when Jonathan was still alive, I performed several times in the Sternberg residence.
Uh-huh.
I mean, sorry, Jeff is certainly would be at the very top of my list for having a musician lead some kind of performance in conjunction with the work. I mean, he did play quite often at our house and for my parents, and in particular for my father in his later years.
Ah, very nice. So we'll have to talk to you, Jeffrey, about doing something.
Okay, I just sent you the portraits, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, and here's another one. Kyle Smith and ensemble did perform live in an opening of Ursula's work. So we have some ideas here for doing something around music and Ursula Sternberg's collection here at Penn. I think that's quite exciting.
Kyle's daughter was my student.
Okay. It's a small world, right? So I think that's a lovely idea, that we think about a future Music in the Pavilion that ties in with the collection. So I will put that out there with my colleagues who work on this, but I would love to talk to you, both Peter and Jeffrey, about what we might do. Any other comments or? Well, if there's nothing else for today, I think we can all thank Holly for a wonderful presentation despite the internet. And we thank her for all the work she's done with the collection. She's a real advocate for it and has done a wonderful job presenting it to us. So thank you, Holly. And thanks to everybody who came today.
Yeah,
Really,
thank
really
you.
appreciate all of the friends of Ursula and Jonathan coming, and it's lovely to see you, Peter. I'm glad you were able to make it.
There's and there's also, just for your information, there is my mother's sister who is on the phone. I see her signed in, so she's
Oh.
there listening as well, and she knows more about this than anybody else.
Okay. How wonderful. Thank you for letting us know.
From Italy.
Ah. Well, it's been wonderful to have everybody here today. So
Thank you for having put this on, and thank you, Holly, for that. That was a very good presentation.
Thank you. And I really love seeing all the people that she knew. It makes me feel even more connected to her. It's really lovely. Thank you all.
bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.